Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. You got a friend in me. Yeah, you got a friend in me. I'm Wendy Newman. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Comics Explained. We are covering Venom. Yes, we are. The follow-up to what it is that directly happened to Eddie Brock, right? Because in the last video that we did, I left you guys on like this insane cliffhanger, right? And like Venom died, and I was like, Eddie Brock is dead. With that being said, guys, and just bounced, and you guys were like, no! It was kind of amazing. But in this video, we find out what actually happened to Eddie Brock, right? So the cool thing about this is we would largely assume that Eddie Brock had died, but the way that Donny Cates plays this is amazing. And this is why Donny Cates, this is why I'm really liking Donny Cates. When he first took over Venom, and even when he wrote Thanos and things like that, it was kind of hard to get a gauge of what kind of writer Donny Cates was. You knew he was a great writer, but you didn't know the nuances behind his writing style. And what we're kind of learning here is Donny Cates is almost kind of like this perfect blend between like Jonathan Hickman and Scott Snyder and Jeff Johns, where he plants these little seeds, these little tidbits of things that might become important later on, and they actually do, right? So in this instance, Eddie Brock, when his body basically dies, right, when he's effectively killed, that he just kind of comes falling down into this place called the Abyss, right? Now, this happens immediately as soon as he hits the vehicle, right? So this is before he dies at the end of the last video, that he was technically, quote unquote, dead before that happened, that his body just kind of fallen, you know, into this sort of underbelly, right? This sort of abyss. And he kind of talks about these things, right? Like, you know, he's fallen before and there's only darkness and things like that, that he can see his physical form, you know, that it's kind of in the world above him, but it's almost like on a spiritual level, he's kind of losing himself. And Donny Cates almost kind of plays it fast and loose with the idea of like what happens when a person dies, because Marvel doesn't really give us any sort of consistent explanation on that, right? Like if you go and you read the old Chris Claremont X-Men stories, for example, you get a depiction of what the realm of Mistress Death actually looks like, right? Where it's basically just all these really tall pillars, and each one represents somebody's afterlife. But then you have like the realm of Mephisto, where you have, you know, one of the versions of hell that's basically kept by the various hell lords. And then you have like the realm of Hela, right, which is called hell in and of itself, you know, and that's where people who are dead go. And you have all these different indications and depictions of like where the soul goes when a person dies. But for Eddie here, you know, in the midst of this place that he's in, it's not really recognizable to him. But then he kind of hears this disembodied voice, and it's just like, Brock, right? It's just, you know, and it just literally jars him, right? Like that. And he's just like, wake up! And it's really cool. You know, he addresses him as like a soldier. He's like, wake up, soldier, you know, and he's like, Knull's minions, like, they have you, man. Like, and this is when it's really given to us, where we end up finding out that where he's at right now is he's part of the hive, right? He's part of the collective hive of Knull, the symbiote god. That yes, his physical body's dead, but his essence has kind of moved on. And there's a reason why this happens, and it's really cool. But, you know, one of the things that this disembodied voice basically tells him is, if you're going to move, right, if like what you need to do, you need to make yourself stop, right? Like if you're going to break out of this hive, or at least try to, you know, maintain your sanity in this hive and keep from being consumed by like all the symbiotes, you know, basically Knull himself, then you have to maintain your own self. And the only way to do that is to stop yourself from falling. And the only way to stop yourself from falling is to brace for impact and land. And that's exactly what he does, right? He does the superhero landing, right? He does the superhero landing. And then suddenly he's met by a guy he doesn't recognize. Now, if you're familiar with Donny Cates' Venom run, you do know who this guy is, right? And it took me a minute to remember. I was like, who in the heck is this? And I was like, that's right. And it turns out to be Strickland, right? Now, Strickland, for those of you guys who are a little fuzzy here on his character, Strickland was one of the guys who was kind of bonded to a Venom symbiote during the days of the Vietnam War. I think it was the Vietnam War. But he was basically one of the first people in the history of the world to be bonded with a Venom symbiote. He only had it for a few years, and then ultimately Strickland ended up dying, as far as I'm aware, and instead his symbiote basically replicated it, right? It took its place. The rest of Strickland's team ended up dying, but all that was kind of lead up to the notion, or the introduction of the idea of the Grendel and like Knull and all that kind of stuff. We've got videos on it if you guys want to go check it all out, kind of get yourself fully refreshed on the nature of the character. But what he basically says here, where Eddie Brock kind of asked the question, like, why am I here, right? Because he sees like a handful of people running, and he jumps in to try to save them, but they're like ghosts, right? He literally just passes right through them. He can't really touch them. He can't interact with them. So it's really more him that's the ghost. And there's even like a giant dragon that comes like flying down and seems to know that Eddie's there, right? And Eddie like goes to attack it. I don't know what he was gonna do by punching a dragon, but the dragon just kind of flies, right? It just kind of blows right through him and almost kind of, it gives him the feeling that like he's being ripped apart. And so what he ends up doing, or at least what he's told by Rex here, is that the reason why he's in this place is because of the Codex. Because if you guys remember that one of the things that Donny Cates established is that every time a symbiote bonds itself to a host, that when the symbiote leaves that host, it leaves behind a kind of codex inside that host. And so what this is, to make this a lot easier to understand, this is just one small aspect of Eddie Brock's consciousness, essentially, right? If you could break his consciousness down to like an almost biotechnological organism, it would be the codex, and that's where it is now, right? His consciousness has been absorbed into Knull by virtue of the codex because he was a symbiote at one point in time. And it's one of these things where it almost seems to point to this idea that whenever a person who is a host for a symbiote dies, that they almost kind of join this black abyss, right? It's almost like the afterlife, like where speedsters join the Speed Force. This is where symbiote hosts go. Now, it's not absolute, it's not concrete, because we see people here who have basically been absorbed by Knull when they were consumed by symbiotes, but it all almost kind of lends credence to it, right? It's not like somebody out there was shot in the head and some mugging gone wrong, and then now they're part of Knull, right? Like every single person that you see here, every single body that you see here is a person who was contacted with a symbiote and then absorbed into Knull. Well, the question becomes, if that's the case, if Rex Strickland is here because of his shred of consciousness surviving through the codex and being absorbed by Knull, and if Eddie Brock is here because his portion of his consciousness was absorbed through the codex and now is part of Knull, then why isn't anybody else moving around and talking, right? Why are they the only ones who are really aware of what's going on and everybody else just looks like characters out of the Matrix? The reason why is because of the fact that they had been bonded with symbiotes for so long. Their connection is stronger than everybody else's. One thing to keep in mind here, everybody here that you see strung up, right? Ben Grimm, Captain America, Vision, all these different characters, that they were bonded with symbiotes for moments, right? Like it was literally, seconds. Or if they were bonded with a symbiote over the course of their publication history, it was only for like a single event, right? Or for a few moments in time. Whereas Rex Strickland had his symbiote for years, and Eddie Brock had his symbiote for years still, right? For even longer than that. And so it's kind of a crazy thing where, where Eddie doesn't fully grasp the reality of what's going on, that this kind of realm that they're in is almost a mirror. They're almost really in the real world, but the reality is it's almost like an illusion, right? It's almost like a mirror of the real world. They can't really react with anything. They can't really touch anything. They can just kind of exist in that place. And that's it. They just sort of exist and they stay there. And there really doesn't seem to be any true escape. And it's one of the things that Eddie kind of asks, well, then like, why can't I go back to the real world, right? I mean, if my consciousness is alive here, then why can't I simply just leave this place and go back? And he's like, do you not know? Like, he's like, dude, you don't know. And it's like, Eddie Brock, you're dead, man. Like, you're literally laying dead on a hospital bed and like your kid's crying over you. Like, and it's one of the things where Eddie freaks, right? Eddie absolutely freaks out when he hears that. And this is one of the cool things, right? This is one of the best things about this, because Donny Cates, I'm going to say this, I don't care what anybody out there says. Donny Cates' handling of Venom is probably the single best handling of the Venom character in the history of Marvel Comics, right? And I don't really even believe there's anybody who can argue that point adequately, right? They might be able to make a couple good points here and there, but nobody could actually maintain that point for the long haul and say, actually, Agent Venom's run was much better. No, this run is far more complex. It's a lot more nuanced. Agent Venom's great, but it's no Donny Cates Venom run, right? It's just not on this same level. But it's kind of crazy here, because what you end up getting is Eddie Brock just kind of freaking out and saying, like, over the course of my whole life, I've had to give things up, I've lost things, I've had things taken from me. Like, I'm literally a man of sacrifice and loss, and I'm not gonna let them take this, right? Like, I'm not gonna let them take my death. Like, if I'm gonna die, it's gonna be on my terms. And so his whole idea here is, okay, if we can walk around inside this void, right, this abyss, this living abyss where Knull reigns supreme, then if I'm here, that means my symbiote's here. So it's like, I'm gonna find my symbiote, and working together, we can bust out of this place, right? We can literally break away from the hive mind and just kind of show up. Now, the reality, and this is one of the big differences here, until Eddie Brock's consciousness merges with his physical body, it would basically be his consciousness hitching a ride alongside the symbiote. The symbiote would appear and it would look like Eddie Brock, but it wouldn't really be his physical form, assuming that even happens. And the reason why I say assuming is because Rex says, okay, like, I believe you on this, man, and I believe that you can do it, right? I mean, you're a hard-hitting guy. I kind of misjudged you a little bit, but here's the problem that you have. Finding your symbiote is not going to be the problem. Getting to it and freeing it, that's the problem. Because we find out that when Knull took the symbiote of Eddie, when he took the actual Venom symbiote, he didn't just disperse it among the, everything else in the abyss. Instead, he keeps it close. he holds on to it, right? So Eddie's literally gonna have to find a way to get to Knull and then steal his symbiote back. And that's when he's kind of like, okay, well, I mean, how am I supposed to get up there by myself? And the response of Rex is, no, you don't have to do it by yourself, man, right? You don't have to do it by yourself. I'm gonna go with you. But here's the more important thing. Yes, I recruited you for this mission and to help me go back and take these symbiotes. Like, yes, I recruited you as a kind of agent. That's what I wanted you to be. But the reality is that you were not an agent, Eddie Brock. You were never really an agent. You were a guy who came across a symbiote one day and did some things, and you've been bonded with it for a long time, but you were not the kind of man I was looking for. Fortunately, inside this place, I did find the man that I was looking for, only for us to find out that Agent Venom, Flash Thompson, has returned. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.